وده من طارق الزين أحمد. He has been working in the construction industry for the past 6 years. Recently, he completed a master's in sustainability leadership in the built environment with a thesis on solar PV in Sudan. أستاذ طارق زين، مرحب بك، ونأمل إنك تقدر تقدم المحتوى بتاعك. مظبوط، جميل.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
أهلا.
سامعني؟
سامعنك، هاي تفضل.
كويس. أنا بعمل شيرنج إن شاء الله. شكرا للإضافة، ونتمنى يكون كونفرنس ناجح إن شاء الله. شايفين الشاشة؟
Yes.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. I'm going to say this in English because it's just more comfortable for me this way. But my topic is going to be on rooftop solar photovoltaic potential in Khartoum, Sudan. So this is the research I did for my thesis on my master's. So let's start. So this is briefly what I'm going to cover: introduction, the literature review, the research, the method I used, the findings, and then recommendations and next things that can happen. So why did I choose this topic? Well, for me, the primary reason is the increasing electricity demand in Sudan. Is that especially in Khartoum, and I'm sure many of you have been there regularly, and you would notice that there are power outages. This is particularly the case in the summertime. It hasn't improved over the years, so we have to find a solution. So this was my main motivation. And of course, we're all concerned about climate change. So we need to ensure that whatever solution we put forward, it meets our obligations to limit climate change and also meet the UN Sustainability Development Goals. This is just a rough estimation of the predicted electricity demand in Khartoum, the capital of Sudan. So it's expected to increase by almost 30% by 2030. So this power outage issues that we're having in the country, it will only get worse over the years, unless something is done to increase the electricity capacity. Why did I choose to focus on solar? Well, solar is basically the future. By 2050, it's predicted to be the largest source of electricity. So we're going to see a lot more of it, whether we like it or not. And also, it's reducing in price approximately 4% every year. So it's going to get cheaper and easier for people to install. And of course, the benefit of solar is that it's sustainable, at least during the operation. It doesn't produce any carbon. My research question that I put forward was, what potential does residential rooftop solar PV have in meeting future electricity demand in the city of Khartoum, Sudan? And my main aim is to influence policymakers and the local community to help them understand the potential of rooftop solar. So this is just a brief summary of the current power capacity in Sudan. The majority of the electricity is from hydropower, and also the rest is from thermal fossil fuel power. Of course, they have their challenges as well. So with hydro, there's a limit to how many hydro dams you can build, and I'm sure many of you are aware of the problems we're having with the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. So we can't keep on building hydro power stations, and obviously also causes environmental impacts such as flooding, for example. And with thermal fossil fuel, it is very expensive to operate. The government has to spend millions to buy the fuels for it, as well as it's contributing to air pollution. Fortunately, Sudan is blessed with high solar radiation, and it's actually the second best country in Africa with regards to the amount of solar energy it can obtain. As an example, the average solar irradiance is between 5.8 to 7 kilowatts per hour. This is almost double that of Germany, whereas Germany has more than 10 times the amount of solar panels compared to Sudan. Unfortunately, less than 1% of the total electricity generated in Sudan is from solar, despite the high potential. And why did I choose rooftop solar PV? Well, I focus on this because the benefits of rooftop solar PV is that it provides electricity to the household as well as contributes electricity back to the grid. So it increases the overall electricity capacity in the network. And of course, the majority of the electricity in Khartoum in Sudan is consumed during the daytime, approximately 70%. And this is where solar works best. It works during the daytime best. So there's a good match there. This is a brief summary of Khartoum. So it's the capital of Sudan with a population of around 5 million, increasing. It's blessed also with a lot of sunlight hours. Some people might complain and say that this is not a blessing, but it's a blessing with regards to energy and solar in particular. So for my research, what I focused on is firstly is to understand the challenges that using rooftop solar PV presents to the economy and to the city. So I was fortunate to be able to meet with representatives from various areas in Sudan, including a representative from the Ministry of Energy, an investment bank, a solar PV contractor based in Sudan, and also a homeowner who's also a research professor. And he's one of the first people I know in Sudan to actually own a solar PV system. So I managed to interview all these people and found their opinions. I also estimated using theoretical methods the number of houses that are needed in order to meet the number of houses that need to install solar PV in order to meet the electricity demand by 2030. So firstly, from the interviews, these were the main challenges that the stakeholders brought forward. The Ministry of Water and Electricity, they mentioned that the key challenge, they like the idea of rooftop solar PV, but their key challenge is that the government funds, they say, is lacking at present. And also another challenge is the grid infrastructure at present. So the electricity grid might not be suitable for solar photovoltaics, and it might need to be upgraded. So the first thing that they need to do is to do a grid network study in order to see whether the infrastructure needs upgrading or whether it has capacity to allow rooftop solar PV. The investment bank actually gave me a good example of a rural area where they installed rooftop PV in Sudan. There was only around, I think, 60 homes, but they were very comfortable with the idea. But they did mention that the challenge would be the overall cost of the system. If they were to provide loans, for example, to homeowners to install rooftop PV, it would increase the cost of the system by up to 50%. The contractor was also positive with the idea, and they had a lot of technicians working for them. And fortunately, the solar contractors in Khartoum, there are quite many actually, but the majority work in agricultural areas, and they had no experience with rooftop PV. But they said the main challenge would be the cost and the fact that there aren't any subsidies for homeowners to install rooftop PV, especially things such as feed-in tariffs, which is used in many countries, and it helps to reduce the cost of rooftop PV. And the homeowner, obviously he has the experience of having a rooftop PV system in his house. He said the largest challenge to this is the current electricity prices in Sudan. So Sudan has one of the lowest electricity prices, not just in the world, but even in sub-Saharan Africa. It's very, very cheap. And this would discourage some people from investing in solar electricity. But he said the main benefit to rooftop PV would be that it will help to prevent power outages. So from my theoretical calculations, so I've basically estimated the average rooftop area and used an equation to understand basically how many households would be required to meet the demand of 3 terawatts by 2030. So if everyone, if you look at the 4.5 kilowatts, that's the size of the roof of the solar PV system. If you have around 310,000 homes install the system by 2030, then that would be sufficient for the electricity demand, for example. The 4.5 kilowatts, it might cost up to $3,000 US. So approximately it might be up to $1 billion US to have 310,000 houses installed with this system. Obviously, if you increase the system size, then you would need less houses. I also looked at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of rooftop PV, known as a SWOT analysis, from the literature review, from the interviewers, from the theoretical calculations I did. And the strength that Khartoum has for this technology is the high solar radiation and long sunshine hours. This will greatly help with the amount of energy that can be generated from rooftop PV. And also, from my estimates, the number of the rooftop area is basically sufficient for the rooftop PV. However, the weaknesses were the low grid electricity prices. This would discourage a lot of people from investing, and they would just rely on the current electricity. And of course, the government budget is at present, they can't fund thousands of houses to have rooftop PV. So that's another area that needs to be looked at. With regards to opportunities, the government, for example, can look at energy policies and subsidies. So people who are interested in having this system installed, then they can get grants or investments from the government to help them cover the cost. And also, there's an opportunity of increasing the grid capacity. So the more rooftop solar PV you have, the higher the electricity capacity you have in the country, and the less likely that you have, for example, power cuts. And there's a benefit to the economy as well through job creation. But the threats to rooftop PV in Khartoum is the network infrastructure, as this may require significant upgrades if you want to have rooftop PV on a large scale. So first, this needs to be looked at. And of course, the political instability is another threat. This has been mentioned by various presenters in this conference, but it's very, very important that we try and support the government and we try what we can do to ensure that there's stability in the country. So when we look at Khartoum in general, there's a low-income households and medium-high-income households. From my findings, the rooftop PV would probably suit the high medium-income households better because obviously of the high cost. With regards to the low-income households, there might be some problems with on the roof integrity. So if you have rooftop solar panels on such roofs, it might not be strong enough to hold it. And of course, it might not be affordable for such households. So the best strategy, in my opinion, is to have the solar farms installed by and funded by the government to provide electricity to the low-income households. And for the high-income households, these can be incentivized and encouraged to install rooftop PV. So what's the next steps and recommendations? The next step, if we are really serious about rooftop PV in Khartoum, is to perform a grid network study. This is to see whether the grid infrastructure has the capacity to support rooftop PV on a large scale. So that's very, very important. And we can also, the government can also encourage individual homeowners to install rooftop PV through incentives to make it cheaper for them, such as zero tax on solar panels, which will reduce the price of the solar panels, for example. And also, the government can look at increasing the grid electricity tariffs. This can be increased for the higher income households, but for the lower income households, the price can be kept the same. This will help to raise funds for the government to allow them to invest in solar PV. And also the government can pilot rooftop PV in certain areas and monitor to see how it performs. Thank you for listening. Shukran jazilan. And if anyone's interested in furthering this research, then I'm more than happy to be involved with them. Thank you.
شكرا جزيلا طارق.
بنحلم بفضاء أوسع، بنحلم بزمن أجمل، بلاد ميلاد، بلاد ميلاد. بنحلم بفضاء أوسع، بنحلم بزمن أجمل، بلاد ممتد لحد حدود الحد، وطن لا